I call the meeting to order, City of University Heights City Council meeting. Tonight is Tuesday, August 27th. We got a great crowd of people. Thank you for all coming. And roll call, all council are present. First order of business is approval of minutes July 9th and August 13th. Are there any additions or corrections?
I do know of one on the August 13th. Miss Virginia was so good, she was absent and yet still voting at the same time, so that will be corrected.
Okay. With that correction, the minutes will be approved by unanimous consent. Public input. I have two people who signed up to speak. To begin with, Paul Moore. Would you like to speak to the council tonight?
Paul Moore, 1006 Melrose Avenue. I want to thank whoever patched Melrose Avenue where we've got an orange cone on the corner. But I have a question about that property. And I don't know if Josiah knows right offhand, but that area's been patched around that manhole before, with a section of the paving replaced, and it's deteriorating, and I wonder if that's part of the sanitary sewer or if that's part of the telecommunications. Whose responsibility? And I wonder if that manhole itself is deteriorating, why the paving keeps settling and breaking. And so I'd recommend somebody request that Josiah explore that, so we have some idea in the future to get it repaired correctly.
And this is where the orange cone is at the end of your property.
Yes.
Josiah, weren't you notified of that? Because Paul had notified me and Dottie earlier.
Yeah, I'm 99% sure it's sanitary sewer. And one of the things Iowa City's been doing is they've tried to replace like the top section of their sanitary sewers through town. So I'm trying to see if they can bump that one up on their list.
Okay. Well, I just wonder why
They
it
would
keeps
re- they would
deteriorating
inspect it and rebuild
underneath.
it as part of that. So in the inspection process, we could determine that.
All right. Then on another subject, I've been approached by people wanting to use motorized wheelchairs on the public sidewalk and golf carts on the street in regards to football games for handicapped people. Do you have an ordinance that addresses that?
We don't have an ordinance that addresses golf carts on the street. The state law says that unless the city has an ordinance that would permit golf carts to be used on the street, then they're prohibited, and we don't have one of those. So they're by default, golf carts on the street are prohibited. If the council wanted to enact an ordinance for the limited times of football games, or more generally, the council would have the prerogative to do that.
Okay. Well, to follow up on that, is there any knowledge of anybody that willing to transport handicapped people to the game with those type devices or not?
Well, I know it's been done in the past.
I do too.
mean,
I see 'em running
I've
around,
seen
but
them,
I
you
don't-
know, with and the university has, but I thought it was they don't go too far out of the Kenneck area, but I think I know that
Well, I
they
know there's
transport.
a three-wheeled motorcycle. I've seen that, and I've seen a John Deere Gator hauling people, and Brennan McGrath, he used to have a golf cart that with his wine business, and I don't know if he's changed companies, if he's still got one or not. But
Well, I don't know, but you're talking for ADA accessibility or something, because
well,
I know
yeah,
the
to
university
transport
does that.
people that are like everybody else. A lot of my patrons in the parking lot are getting old, but they're too bullheaded to stop going to the game. And so I'm getting these phone calls and haven't been confronted with this before, and I don't want to recommend anything, especially when I don't know what I'm talking about. So if
Well-
anybody has any input on that, I'd appreciate it. So Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And Kip Sheldon, you signed up to speak. Welcome, Kip.
Did. I don't know if this is the appropriate time.
Yeah, this would
in
be,
regards to the
I know you
signage.
want to talk about
Do you?
the
Okay.
tree board, right?
Yep. I'm 316 Mahaska Drive, Kip Sheldon. I wanted to, I guess last council meeting, well, I guess that would have been in June. We talked about signage for the park. And so you'd asked me to provide some sort of an idea of the cost it might cost us to put signs in, I guess, the normal entryways. And I calculated 3, maybe 4 natural areas in which people would enter the tract. And this is what I found. I Googled it. It was rather easy to find. The signs seem to be rather, the ones that we want for a temporary basis would be rather cheap. We're talking in the $20 to $40, $45 range. And we just have to determine the park rules. You as a council member would have to determine what we wanted to be put on those signs, along with the
Kip, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you-
oh, sure, along with the posts, which I believe I included in that.
I'm getting to that next.
And
Oh, the wording? Did you include the wording that you're suggesting?
I did not include
Oh,
that.
I
have some
see.
suggestions that I can provide later for the council
I
to
see, sure.
discuss. But it's the general, verbiage that is on other, are on other
Well,
parks.
you start with the chicken or the egg, one of the
Right.
two.
Here, talk
So,
about the sign and then we'll.
It's something like that. No, the park rules. Now, on Prospect Place, there is a post already there. So
There's one.
there's one. So $30. Let's say there's 4 of them. So we're talking around the $300 range, and then installation, I would suggest maybe $50 a sign for labor. So about
Russ
five.
can do it.
Excuse me.
Russ can do this.
So $300, $300 to $500, depending on labor, would be the cost to get us started and moving forward on the Swisher tract. So.
Yeah, I think we should do it.
In regards to Paul's question, I wouldn't see a problem during game days for people to utilize golf carts as long as they, they're lawful. And do you see a problem with providing for something that it's maybe something we should look at? I don't see a problem in it because it's really hard to get around.
they turned the mic up. There
Yeah.
you go.
There we go.
Good deal.
So do you have any questions in regards to signage?
What
So,
do we do next?
Yeah.
Mock up a sample with language?
Correct? And then
Yeah.
purchase them and install them.
Let's do it.
So.
Sounds good.
That's all I have.
and so in
Oh.
2 weeks in September, is the tree board going to work on some verbiage to make some suggestions, just
For-
so we can get a starting?
Oh,
point?
absolutely.
That'd be great.
We've already worked on that, so.
And then that's in 2 weeks.
Correct.
Great. That's great. We need to start with signage. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for working on that.
Okay, okay, come on up. You don't have to sign up. You gotta. Well, thank you.
My name's Scott McLeod. I live over here at 1 University Way, and I'm here with Karen Franklin and Steve to raise an issue that looks like it's on your agenda, and that's the striping of Melrose. We have a big group over here of folks that meet once a month, wine and to talk about things in the neighborhood. And one thing that came up was the fact that some people have had issues being able to turn left into University Way because folks traveling west on Melrose that don't realize that that's a turn lane. And it's a safety issue, and it looks like it's on your agenda. a lot of these folks over there, including myself, have only lived here in University Heights for a year, so we don't know your process. When you do the striping, if you do the striping, how long it lasts, and one thing we thought about was whether or not it's possible for you to do it in the spring. I don't know what your issues are with that. We've heard various things from various people about, well, the type of material you use for striping has to be eco-friendly and certain things like that, but it's really, right now, it's not in a good shape, particularly for football games. Folks heading out after the game, but I'm assuming that you're going to take that up today. the striping
Yes,
issue, and-
we are. And Josiah, why don't you just tell them that we do it once a little bit, we do it once a year, and
Yeah.
we do it in the fall, like this time.
That's pretty much it. We usually do it in the fall,
Do you?
in August, right before or around when school starts.
How long does it usually last?
We do it every year. Obviously,
We had a bad
some of
winter.
them last better than others,
Must
but
have.
yeah.
Good, well, I'm not really in favor of petitions all the time, but at least it gives you a
Oh, you have a
concern for-
petition? Oh,
well,
that's
just the number
wonderful.
of people that raised the issue.
Oh, my.
And there's
It looks
about
like there might be about,
30 there.
yeah,
Mhm.
maybe
So anyway,
35,
do with it what you will.
25, and,
Thank you.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mayor, may I make a
Sure.
suggestion to Josiah? I know I've seen before these, what they put on streets, something that the snow removal wouldn't hurt, but they're, what are they? Just small little pucks?
Reflector things.
Yes. You know what I'm saying? That
In the pavement.
in the pavement that are, it's not translucent, but they're reflective, is something to consider in those areas where,
So those around here, typically those are gone.
they don't
after
last long.
every-
Well, it was just a suggestion,
Yeah.
something to consider.
Yeah, they do work great, but they're gone.
Oh, Mike, you want to speak?
Mike Ritchie, 20 Olive Court. First thing I'd like to, whoever redid the website did an excellent job on that. It's a lot more user-friendly for old people like me to maneuver on that computer. The second thing I'd like to tell the council that appointing Terry Gert as interim rental inspector is a very wise choice. Every dealing I've had with Terry, he's just a good guy to work with and stuff on there. The third thing that I wanted to mention is, I don't know if there's been any discussion on the rental moratorium. And about 2 months ago, I read where in Iowa City, some of these rental companies were taking like a reservation to rent the place. Not a deposit on that, but a reservation, and they were not giving that money back either. And I don't know where the council goes on this moratorium, but I think the council can address certain issues and what a landlord or a rental company can do. Doing that to a person should be illegal, in my book. Number two, before the meeting started, I heard the police chief and Dottie, with these permits coming on board, to put on people's doors on snow removal and that. And with what happened last year, the buck has to stop with the landlord, not the student or the tenant living there. And quite frankly, like at my house, the kids go out the back door and stuff. So if you put a sign on there to mow or snow removal, it's probably going to be there in the spring. So if there was an issue and you wanted to contact, I think, if it wouldn't be too much of a problem, is to send out an email on this thing. But this responsibility should not go to the tenant by no means. And I just was wondering, and maybe Steve can answer this, what would be the legality of putting restrictions on what a landlord could put on a lease?
So the city has authority that's not inconsistent with the state law, Mike. So the city can add things to the existing Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, but it can't adopt something that would be different than that. I mean, it can be an addition to, but it can't take away from or be contrary to that.
Okay.
I've heard about that. I read it probably the same place you did. I know people are challenging it. I don't know where any of that really stands or sits.
I've never heard anything like that
Yeah, it was
anywhere.
news to me
And-
too.
And that's the kind of stuff I think that just needs to be some protection given out. Thank
So,
you.
Steve, you
let
and
me
I had discussed that, hadn't we? That we thought it was not acceptable that landlords were charging these fees or passing these fees on to their tenants and making their tenants pay for them. And your answer was that we can't interfere in that relationship, right?
Well,
Or am
I'm
I
not
wrong?
sure about what fees. The ones Mike's
Okay.
talking about is like an application deposit or something, and then somehow making that non-refundable. Is that?
Okay.
I don't remember talking about that, but
I thought he was talking about the snow removal charges.
the well,
Both, yeah.
yeah, unless the council took action, and I'm not sure. I'd have to look at the code because I think the code says that with a particular size of rental property, like a single-family residence, I think the code says that it's the responsibility of the landlord unless the landlord passes that on in a lease to the tenant. And I'm not sure we can say, except in University Heights, the landlord can't do that. I'd have
Yeah.
to take a look at that, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
But wouldn't the obligation follow then that the property owner would need to monitor the tenant to be sure that occurs, and if not, they would be responsible?
Yeah, so it's kind of like property law, which I'm sure you remember fondly. It depends, if you think of whose obligation is it to remove snow? Well, it kind of depends on who's asking. If it's between the landlord and the tenant, and the landlord has said in a lease, the tenant, it's your job, well, then maybe it is the tenant's job. But as it concerns the city may always look
Yeah.
to the property owner, and the
Yeah.
property owner won't have a valid defense against the city by saying, oh, my tenant's supposed to do that.
Yeah, well, I would think that would,
But can the city prohibit the landlord from charging fees to the tenant as it regards to snow removal?
Charging fees for it?
Mhm.
You mean like passing on fees for,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Mhm.
I can find, I'll look
Okay.
at it.
Like $423 worth of fees.
like Szymanski did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I thought the answer was no, and if it's not, that's something that
Yeah,
we should
yeah.
look into.
Yeah.
So as it exists, we don't have any prohibition. But I'll answer your question about whether we can impose something.
Thank you.
And Dottie will be discussing that a little more under her agenda item. Would anyone else like to speak to the council tonight? Okay, thank you. We'll go on to building, zoning, and sanitation. And Virginia, you circulated your report a couple weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago. So the big thing I have going is this contract we need to run to remove some unsafe trees from the perimeter of Swisher Tract. Council has received a copy of this. I haven't really gotten any comments back. Tree Board has gotten a copy of it. I got a couple comments back that were useful, so thank you for that. Kip Sheldon from the Tree Board has generously offered to assist with the oversight of this project. And so I have filled his name in the contract as a city designee. So that's one thing I need to make sure everybody's okay with. And then the only public feedback I've gotten on this so far is, why is this taking so long? It needs to be done faster. Because these are dangerous, they might fall, that kind of thing. So the only option I see for speeding this up is to approve a contract and circulate the RFP. I don't know. I mean, I think we'd have to have a special meeting and cut a couple of weeks off of the RFP circulation. I don't know if we can do that or not, or if there's council interest in doing that. Does anyone else have questions or comments that they want?
I don't think we'd be losing anything by following the original timetable that you proposed, only because most of the crews that are doing professional bonded tree services, they're right now fully engaged. So I'd hate to pass up on, we're going to end
Okay,
up
so
with that
stay
same
with
problem.
the stay with the proposed
course.
timeline.
And the best example of this is what happened with the Olive Court repaving. We went out to bid right at a time when everybody was busy anyway.
Okay.
So I think you don't lose anything by rushing.
Okay. Now,
Does the
Kip
rest
and
of the
I
council agree on that? Would you? keep going on the timetable that she has now within like 60 days it is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I didn't build any real extra time into this time frame as proposed. Now Kip and I still need to take a walk to double check everything that is in Addendum A and see if we want to propose any additional like specifications or instructions on what to do with stuff back there. So we will still get that done. And then Josiah, I saw in your engineer's report this month that you had recommended some clearing be done at the end of Sunset. And so I wanted to find out if there's interest in trying to roll that clearing into this project as well, since it's all happening right in the same area.
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Yeah.
Going through that. So in my report, I looked at, the dead end of North Sunset and the dead end of Prospect, and there were, on both locations, there's, Prospect, there's some dead trees in the right of way, and there's a bunch of growth in the street. And
Mm-hmm.
on North Sunset, I don't see any dead trees, but there's a lot of trees and things overhanging the street, which would be good to roll into this, I think.
Is there council consensus to try to roll that clearing into this project to be done all at one time?
The North Sunset.
Yeah, the north
Because you
end of
already have the
Sunset
Prospect.
and the end of Prospect. Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is already covered. I think a lot of the trees that were identified by Mark Vitosh and myself are probably the trees that you have in mind, but we should walk it together and make sure that.
Okay.
Is that okay? Is that acceptable to council?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like Sylvia
So
and Lisa.
before the September regular meeting, how about Josiah and Kip and I try to go through this list and make sure that we've got everything covered.
Are the trees marked so that any of these guys who want to come and check out the land are able to see it?
The trees are marked with a
Spray
white spray paint, but
Okay.
I'm thinking we should go ahead and mark them with like a big orange X in addition, just to make sure there's no confusion.
Yeah.
We were trying to be a little subtle on the first round. Okay, so that's the plan. Any other questions? So next up, consider appointing Terry Gert as interim rental housing inspector. Since Stan quit, we do not have a rental housing inspector. It's a bit of an urgent issue since we're under moratorium right now for issuing new rental permits, and we need to, under the guidance of a rental inspector, get that situation worked out and get the moratorium lifted. So I would recommend Terry is already a city employee. He has years of experience. He does building inspections for us as a city of new construction, but he does that for a number of other municipalities in the county and the surrounding counties, as well as doing rental inspections for other municipalities. So he's perfectly well qualified. This is a job he already does for other cities. He already works for us. I do think it's a good idea to conduct a search at some point, but my motion is that we appoint Terry for 6 months as interim rental housing inspector to get this going and get us through the moratorium and get that ended.
Second.
I'll second.
Everybody's
Okay, a second by
Great.
Nick.
I don't
think
mean
he
to
was
draw this out
first, maybe.
unnecessarily.
A discussion.
Why 6 months? I think the moratorium closes in December. Council needs to have some policy discussion before then. And certainly, I'm
I think it's January 15th.
January 15th. Okay, so
But it's close.
Right, it's close. So it's like another 90 days or so. And more importantly, I think we need to make sure that this is an open and transparent process. Terry Gert, I'm happy that he's stepping in and offering his services, and this council has already met with him. I understand you and Dottie and Louise had a previous meeting. And it's also, I would like to see that we keep all of our positions, especially now that we're growing, as competitively open as possible, just because we're growing as a city. And we need to make sure that we are benchmarking as much as possible. And Terry Gert may very well be the candidate, but we don't know that yet. And so long as it's very clear that this is a temporary appointment subject to a competitive process, I'm okay with going in the direction that we adopt tonight. But the language you propose needs to make sure that it's a temporary, because interim doesn't
Yeah, I'd say
uh,
6 months. It's temporary.
Well, it's kind of long duration too. That's not until what, May of next year?
September, October, November, December, January, February.
May.
That would get us over the breach.
February.
Get us
Not
over
May.
the moratorium, and
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's fine.
I think
Okay.
that's fine.
Let's vote.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, motion carries. Terry Gert is here tonight, and you are interim inspector, rental inspector. Did you want to say anything, or what we want to do now is probably set up
Yeah. A work session.
a work
for-
session, special meeting or something. And I want you to have your calendar too, because we got to work on some of these issues because of the moratorium that's on. And can you come up and just tell how your calendar is a little bit? Because I'm thinking, September, and how's your calendar in September?
September is fine. I think I've got 3 days that I'm taking off. I'll be out of town getting recertified my electrical in September, and that's the 10th, 11th, and 12th. I think is what it is. But besides
Oh.
that, I mean, usually when we have a lot of notice, it's very easy to go ahead and schedule, at least for me. And I schedule just everything else around it. So,
Is there a night of the week that works better for you?
God, I don't want to hold
Maybe that 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th in there, Monday through Thursday. I guess it'd be 19. How does that work for council that week or the following week?
Mm-hmm.
To start
Tuesdays
doing
are better.
rental issues, and maybe you can check with Stan
Yeah,
on
Tuesdays the-
information he has.
Not all alone.
You know,
'Cause we
an-
need-
another thing I was
Well, I think we should have a special meeting in case council wants to make some decisions that
Okay.
night, rather than a work session.
You know, the big thing here is we need to get our feet wet and see how much time this is actually going to take.
Right.
I do have another gentleman here that I sort of asked to come to council meeting. He is an actual rental inspector in Iowa City.
Oh.
He's very good, which would be nice to help out when things get busy. I know with 901 Melrose Avenue, I'm usually there about every other morning, and sometimes at night. So, I would probably like to maybe entertain down the road then, seeing how this goes, if we need to have another person helping out when I'm gone, he can step in, and vice versa. I mean, then you got double coverage. So if something comes
And then
up when I'm gone,
He'd be like part-time like you are part-time.
correct.
And
Is
we
it-
didn't talk about your salary, but I'm thinking you get paid just like your salary as a housing inspector. You get paid at the same salary right now.
Correct.
And what's that salary, Louise?
It's like $45 an hour, I
Correct.
think.
Correct.
Yeah, I knew it was 40-something. And so I suppose we need to put that in a motion, his salary, too, wouldn't we, Steve? And then I guess if you want to bring somebody else in, we'd have to discuss that.
Correct. I would, yeah, I would want that. I mean, I would want,
Terry, I know that you do a number of other cities. Iowa City's your principal one.
correct.
How many other cities do you have?
5.
5 other
Yeah, I think
cities?
it's 5.
And so we would be city number 6.
Correct.
And do you do rental housing inspection for all the other cities as well?
Not for all of them,
Or is it
no.
more mainly building inspection?
Correct, but I do rental inspections in West Liberty, and they have quite a few rental properties in West Liberty.
How many years have you been doing rental inspection?
Oh, heavens, I think when I first started at the City of Iowa City, I was helping out doing it, and that's been almost 30 years ago. So, and I've been
Okay.
doing West Liberty for since 1994, 25 years. been doing their rental in their building.
How do you feel about doing policy research
Policy research?
on rental questions?
Oh, I don't,
Questions that aren't legal,
Mhm.
because, legal is completely different department and also a lot more expensive per hour, 200 per hour. So the role here would also be doing policy research, which may have you speaking to other towns like Des Moines
That
Ames.
policy research was the counselor's job.
or any other benchmarking other practices from other cities.
well, that's something I might entertain. I mean, I'm getting closer to retiring from Iowa City since I've got 30 years in. So it just down the road, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It's just have to wait and see.
So I thought the question we were on is, are we going to schedule a special meeting tonight at this meeting? Or do we need to circulate that via email
Well,
and figure that
I
out?
think it'd be good for people's schedule.
Yeah.
Now,
Mhm.
I know Nick is bad on Mondays, so it'd be Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe, or Thursday.
I can't do it Thursday.
I
No
can't do it
Thursday.
Tuesdays.
Wednesday?
Wednesday is
18th.
better.
Wednesday,
18th.
September 18?
Yep,
September 18th,
it's free.
which is a Wednesday
Does that
at.
work for you, Terry?
Yeah, I can make that work.
For a special meeting to discuss regulations on rental housing with the goal of ending the moratorium on new permit issuing.
Okay.
Is that the goal, or is it the goal to pick up where Stan Lauerman left, which is that 4-page memo that he circulated to council?
I mean, I think the goal has to be
The
to end the
ultimate goal.
moratorium.
Well, I
It's
asked him to
ultimate
talk
goal.
Well,
to Stan
that's-
about what he was doing too.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I can talk to Stan.
Yeah, in particular, there's one issue that I'm very, very concerned about, and that is an issue that is prominently disclosed in some of our brochures for the rental program, where landlords are able to enter into a private agreement with their tenant on dwelling rooms, like a room that is not compliant with safety, and that risk of not a non-safe room is assumed by the tenant. And I'm really concerned about any permits that we are, as a city, okaying and approving a permit that goes out to a dwelling unit that has an unsafe room because either it doesn't meet egress or any other safety reasons. But we've allowed it to be contractually, we allow that to happen. And I'm really concerned about human safety in those situations. I don't think the city should be involved in allowing these arrangements. So that's what I'm going to be looking for, Terry. That's why I asked you about policy. And that's where I'm thinking we need assistance there. Is that a common practice that other fully staffed cities have, or what's going on? Because I think that when we issue a permit by the city, it sends out a message that the city is standing behind that permit as a valid and health and human safety are checked off, and that we're standing by those decisions, that those structures are safe as a living space, and therefore they have a rental permit.
Sylvia, would you be willing to send a reference for what you're
I already
talking
did.
about to the rest
I already
of council?
did.
'Cause I'm
I already
not
submitted it to you.
sure
It's
what you're
item
talking
number
about.
1 on one of my comments on the memo that I sent off to Stan Lauerman. So that was furnished to you when he gave us.
get that.
Okay. I
Yeah,
didn't get
he gave it to us as a deadline, and he also included it as an issue in his memorandum that he circulated on his last day when he gave us his notice here in council.
I'll look for that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I was quite surprised to see that. So I don't know how many permits we have out there that involve this unsafe practice.
What time is the meeting on September
7
18th?
o'clock.
Okay.
And
Make-
I'm not sure either, but I'll look it up.
I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to make the motion for pay, but go.
For,
To set pay? $45.
oh, yes, thank you. Thank you very much for making the motion.
All right.
So he will be paid the same
Yes,
as.
I make a motion that the temporary housing inspector is paid $45 an hour. I don't know if we need to also say an otherwise consistent with the other portions of the job description, defining hours, or I don't know, I guess what else we need.
We don't have a copy of that job description. I asked Steve Ballard for it, and I haven't heard back.
For what?
A job description from Stan Laverman's job, his employment contract. I think you were on vacation. I got your out of office.
That's right.
Right? But I wouldn't tie it to an agreement. I don't know what that agreement has.
Well, tonight, the motion is $45 an hour. That part of it,
Mhm.
okay? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Dottie. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Did you want to introduce who you brought? Just
Yeah,
the gentleman
I'd
you
like to.
brought? I don't want to ignore him.
It's Brian Jensen.
Oh, hi.
And,
Hi,
and like I
Brian.
said, he's a rental inspector in Iowa City. He's very good. He's getting all of his certifications, so I think he'd be, real good down the road here.
Housing inspector 1 or 2?
Just housing inspector
Just
right now. He's
housing.
going ahead and getting. I think didn't you get your? Why don't you come up here, Brian, and let him know what?
Didn't look yet, sorry.
Mm-hmm. It's just, doesn't exist, okay.
So, but I do have the certifications in residential and also property maintenance too.
Mhm.
Which is, I understand you guys follow.
Mhm.
So,
Well, thank you for coming. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
to me,
Thank you. And thank you, Terry. Are there any questions for Virginia?
Virginia, I think we're going to have to amend our city budget to also have some calculations of what these $45 costs may be for the first half of the budget year. So we need to go. We need to take this offline and come back with some reasonable number to park.
And
in
thinking
the
ahead,
budget.
we can match our rental permit fees to cover the cost of that.
We can take all of that offline, but that would be contemplated, right?
Amending doesn't happen until next year, though.
Yeah, so that's not until
Um,
next year, but.
That's not what the
That's-
League of Iowa City told me, so I think we've got some options.
Okay, we'll go on to streets and sidewalks. And Dottie, did you want Josiah to start with his report, or do you want?
Sure. he
Okay,
can do that.
Josiah.
But do you want to do yours first?
Let's go to the pavement markings. This would be consideration of resolution 1938. I sent out our quotation from our pavement marking contractor, attached the proposal and the agreement.
Motion adoption of resolution 1938.
I'll second.
Okay, and a second by Dottie, motion by Virginia, second by Dottie. Any discussion?
I had
Ro-
a question.
Okay.
Josiah, how many other folks did we compete this out, or is this just the sole sourcing?
It was our typical contractor this year. We sent it out for quotes last year to 4 or 5, and
Mhm.
no one was interested except this contractor.
Is that because we inquired at a different issue of timing, kind of like Olive Court, or what's the interest not due to? I mean, what's going on there?
I don't know. I don't know the answer. My guess is that, because we use several contractors typically work in this
Mhm.
area. I mean, I'd say typically it's
Mhm.
generally 2.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's a third one, but those other 2 typically do the larger DOT projects. And
Got
they
it.
use different, more expensive materials, typical of like a new street. And so it's just not as desirable as a small project.
Sure. Okay.
When
Thank-
would they do it, once the council okays it?
I've been talking to them, letting them know we'd like to get it done right away, and we've actually sent them a list of areas to focus on, which is Melrose, this west end first,
Right.
working east. So I kind of gave them a list of, here's the number 1 priority, 2, 3. So they're beginning of September. In the next
In
2
Septem-
weeks.
End of September? What did you say? In September?
Starting in the beginning of
In the beginning of September,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Okay, ready to vote? Roll call vote.
Herbold.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Carey.
The other item under my heading there is discussion of city sidewalk repairs. I really don't have much to report this month. Dottie and I are working on the best time that we can get out and walk. tentatively for tomorrow or Friday. So I'll have more to say on that. I submitted a written report. And a couple of things I wanted to point out in there. And Dottie, you had forwarded this on, I think, last week. If you recall, we had the detector loops replaced at the intersection down there at Melrose
Right.
and Kosher, because those were out recently. I think you got notified that they weren't quite working right.
Yeah.
A big thank you to City of Iowa City Traffic Department, who went out and did troubleshooting this week. I just heard back from them this afternoon. So they got into the cabinet, they checked all the connections, they thought maybe some of them had some moisture in it, they cleaned them out, they re-tied all the connections, and they said it seems to be working fine again, so.
Because it has been a problem from time to time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the loops were bad, essentially, and we got those replaced, and it was working, and then, so this was surprising, but apparently the connections in the cabinet needed to be cleaned and reconnected, so as of this afternoon, they're back working. I have two items in here that relate to warrants items.
Yes.
One of them is an invoice from All American Concrete, which I summarized in my report, but essentially they have a contract with the City of Iowa City Water Division to repair street panels in Iowa City over the year that the water department had to dig up for repairs. They had one here at Melrose and Sunset, and it turns out it was right in an area where we had some panels that were in need of replacement, and so they contacted us, which was great, because we got to, essentially they were going to set up all this traffic control for the intersection, and so they were able to add those two right next to it for the same cost as the city. That work is done. They did the Iowa City's work, and they did our work, so that is in there, and our recommendation is to approve that. The other item is the, I believe this is a resolution, we could jump to it, 1935.
Yeah, 1935.
It's a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign and submit the Iowa DNR 5-year permit renewal for your storm sewer system. So your current permit runs out, I think it's like March of next year, but the deadline to file for renewal is in November, and the 5-year permit fee is $1,250.
I motion adoption of resolution 1935.
Okay, motion by Sylvia and second by Dottie. Discussion. Roll call vote.
Casada,
Aye.
Maher,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Herbold,
Aye.
carried.
So the only other items in my report, I provided some update on work in the right-of-way projects that are all essentially substantially complete, but they're all still awaiting restoration being achieved. And then the other item is, as a follow-up to previous direction, to inspect North Sunset Street and Prospect, and then I have several comments about what's going on out there now and what you might be looking for depending on how the Swisher Track plan develops. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Josiah. Now, Dottie, you had several
Yeah,
things.
last council meeting, Mark Phelps came and addressed the council regarding the snow and ice removal, which is a huge problem on our city streets in the winter. I think now is the time to address it before we get involved in football. It's a safety issue with me. There are people falling, they're breaking bones. That cannot happen in our city. So I would like to suggest and enact a resolution for next month's meeting, notifying persons, property owners, what their obligations are. And I asked Troy to get some of the notices from Iowa City, and they have a snow and ice removal notice that they post on the door of the dwelling, and it gives them 24 hours to clean the debris, and if they don't, they'll be fined, and the city will authorize a person to do the cleanup. I feel very strongly that this is a property owner obligation, not a tenant obligation. And if they try to pass it to the tenant, I think they need to monitor whether the tenant is complying or not. I think it's really inappropriate for a college student to be given this responsibility. And they may not even read the lease. They may not know that it has been passed on to them. So I like the notice flyer that Iowa City has. I can pass it around so the council can see it. And I'd like to hang it on the door and then follow up with a letter from the city indicating what their responsibilities are again. The beauty of this is a notice for the entire season, not for one time, but for the whole season. So we don't have to waste our resources, time, effort notifying persons every time, because they will be fined and the snow will be removed at their expense. So Mark is on board with this, and Troy is, and I think it's a good idea. So I want to pass this around so you can see this.
Dottie, I'd like to see some integration of that notice, which I agree is very welcomed. I think it makes our city more responsible for being accountable as an organization, and also allows our residents to feel confident that when they get citations or any other ensuing responsibilities, they've been given a fair shot of notice and an opportunity to correct. So what I would like to see is integration with the new city website. It's my understanding that our website from Civic Plus is able to track when a community like ours sends out one of those orange notices. It'll capture date, time, hour, and final disposition. It'll create a ticket for this issuance and a record, which
and
is
a documentation.
And that is
Right.
what was missing in last month's or the months before his meeting. It was documentation of when the city of University Heights first had an issue, how big the issue was, who was told about the issue, and were they given an opportunity to correct. And I think that this orange notice should work in tandem with our new technology, which is the website. And Civic Plus is able to turn on the module that is needed, or the switch that is needed to the
I
tracking.
think also when the season begins, where we begin to get weather, that there should be a major notice on the website indicating, be aware, be alert, this is your responsibility, so that they're given additional notice, because some people will look at websites, some people won't. But I think it would reinforce it. And as long as we have the website, we might as well use it.
So Steve, this requires an ordinance change, because right now our ordinance does not have a written notice requirement.
Right. I think you can do it by resolution, and you can do it either way.
Let's do it in a way that doesn't get lost in the books, and that is, let's update our ordinance so that it is well defined for future reference what exactly the obligation is.
The ordinance now allows them, us to notice or not to notice, or post or not to post. I want it definitive. I want
do
it
too.
clear.
So you're suggesting now a ordinance change at the beginning you said resolution.
I'll recommend, well, I've talked to Steve about this, and he thought we
I
could
see.
do it with resolution.
That's
But,
the weakest way of approaching this.
In
It's-
your discretion, I want you to be as forceful as you can be. So whatever you come up with will be fine for next meeting. And
Well, how about council consensus? Because we're the policymakers. Steve will certainly work with what direction we give him. So let's us be forceful
Well-
and clear, right?
I would leave it in his discretion.
Why?
But
Why?
If you would like council.
I think
suggestion.
this is the policy issue that council needs to weigh in and give appropriate direction to our city attorney.
Okay, so
Well, so Steve he has direction to do that. Would you want Steve to go ahead and put something down and then have council review?
yeah,
Yeah, but the something is the question, Louise, of whether it's a resolution, which is the weakest form and probably the form that will get lost in history,
Well, he's been
or
talking
put
about
it down in an ordinance.
He's been talking
or
to Don.
amend the ordinance.
That's right.
Okay, I'll talk with Steve about it. So
Yeah, make
we'll
it the
Bring
strongest.
something to the meeting next month.
That's an ordinance. That's the way I would support it.
Well, we have your input. Thank you.
Good.
Let's see, the next thing. I've been getting a number of texts and emails from citizens who are exceedingly disturbed about the vegetation overgrowth on the sidewalks and in persons' backyards in the easement area, specifically on Kosher and on Mahaska. The Mahaska one I personally drove by and looked at today, and it's growing all over the sidewalk on Sunset. So something really needs to be done there. I've also noticed that when I came over here tonight with Troy, that the property is also overgrown with shrubs and things on Sunset and Melrose. So those homeowners up there are not taking care of the property either. So it's not a matter of just cutting the grass 10 or 12 inches. It's a matter of cleaning up all the debris. There's ragweed everywhere, and the city is beginning to look sort of trashy because property owners are not taking responsibility. So I think we have some ordinances and resolutions in place. I know I got a letter, a notice here today from Louise that we've used in the past, which is more about minimum of trees and things over sidewalks and over streets, and maintaining a passageway for pedestrians and roadway. But I think we need to expand that into vegetation which obstructs public view, because it's much bigger than trees. So I don't know how we should go about this. Should we look at that, Steve, for next week or next month? And
Well, don't we usually, we usually have had the streets and sidewalks chair or somebody representing that person and going around and doing what do you call it? Just going around and seeing where the problems are.
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm getting reports, so it's really big.
Yeah, but what enforcement, what follow-up are you doing as Streets and Sidewalks chairwoman?
So far, nothing. I'm just
Okay, so-
collecting it and coming to you. I don't know how to handle it, what you would like to do.
I think those orange, how about a green one? Because it's growth, having some green ones and checking off the box of the corresponding ordinance that might be in question.
Iowa City has a yellow one.
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
we could,
It's just a matter of process, Dottie. What process do you want to have?
I think
I
the
don't think
same-
So leave some letters.
I think a process similar to that with the snow removal.
Did you do that one year,
Done it
Virginia?
a bunch of years. Yeah.
You did it last year?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What, did you put something on the door?
Yeah, we just have I'm sure it's the same letter that Louise gave you. Just fill it out and leave it on the door.
And did you leave it or did you send it?
Sorry?
Did
I
you-
left it. Left it on the door.
And how was the success rate?
Pretty good. Good enough, I'd say.
Yeah. I think people are reasonable.
Yeah.
They may not know that, a bush is obstructing view for someone until you point it out. and they're super, super happy to make it safe. Nobody wants to have an unsafe, unkept home. It's been my experience. They just want to know.
You don't live in my neighborhood. So I don't know.
Who would like to deliver vegetation letters? Somebody's
I think
gotta
streets and
basically
sidewalks,
volunteer to do
right?
it.
I'm not interested in doing it. I would put notices on the door and follow up with, but
Yeah, that's all it takes.
I'm not, going to march around and put stuff, fill it out there and put it on the door. If we had, some worker bee that would like to do that.
How about the housing inspector? Because that used to be part of Stan Laverman's responsibility.
Yeah, we could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
That our police chief who walks around, who's over there in the corner.
It's going to end up with a rainbow packet.
Yeah, because Stan used to do that.
That's right.
I don't know if Stan ever used to do it. I think I did it. I can't do it anymore.
I think Pat Yegi has gone around before.
Yeah, Pat Yagi
Yeah,
has
I mean,
helped
I think
before.
we've had citizens go around before.
Well, I want to be
I've-
sure.
I've done it a number of years. I just don't have time this year. Somebody else is going to need to volunteer.
Yeah,
I think we need to have a
Does this
process.
include things like the vegetation on the sidewalk?
Yeah, everything that's growing
We have some
over.
sidewalks that are disappearing.
Yeah.
I think we
It's-
should ask our police chief if he has time.
Dottie, I
He's on
would
salary.
recommend, it seems to me a reasonable, I think you just need to come up with a process, design it, and present it.
Well, I think the same process as I've outlined for snow removal would be fine. I think a notice on the door.
Whatever sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
I just would hesitate to place extraordinary citations on people without giving them due process, an opportunity to
Well,
correct.
this is notice, and
I wouldn't consider I wouldn't consider these citations. Let's not consider these citations.
They
It's
could
just
turn into, right? But I just say give it to them, let
It's
them
a-
read it, understand it, and move on.
yeah,
Okay.
and
Okay.
as property
So
owners.
you look for somebody to
Yeah,
help
and
with that.
as property owners, everybody has a responsibility as to what they do with their property in the city. So
Thank you, Dottie.
I think we all are under the same net.
Okay. I want to
Okay.
bring back a
Next time.
process, it's in 2 weeks, our
Yeah.
next meeting.
Yeah, I'll do that. It's not too difficult.
Let's get some letters
Okay.
out between now and 2 weeks.
Is there something else?
I
too
think
complicated. It just has to get done.
that's it.
Yeah, we've done this before.
Who's
What-
been
what
doing
is it
this in
that
the
we
last
need to-
18 months is what I'm curious to know.
18 months? I
Yeah.
don't know. I believe I did it last year. And then it's always an issue in August, right? It's always late August because that's
Yeah.
when everything explodes in growth. So throughout the year, for just stuff like weeds and lawns, Stan had been doing that. But then there was usually like a once annual walk around town for the growth explosions.
And I don't think that was Stan doing that.
And that was
I
the
think it
Stan. That was
Virginia.
me and
It
Pat
was-
Yegi and
and
Mark
maybe
Sherrod
Matt
helped
or
one year. I
some
mean, it's
other-
just been volunteers.
So we had a yearly process, and then 2 councils ago, that kind of stopped. Or not kind of, it did stop.
Mhm.
So we had a yearly process. I don't think you need to reinvent it. It just needs to start up
It's
again.
just
Well,
somebody
Dottie
literally
can
just
find
needs to do it.
some
Yeah.
people, is what I mean,
Right. I agree.
to help with it.
Yeah.
Since Virginia doesn't have time this year. And so you'll come back
Yeah.
September
Mhm.
10th.
So, sorry, but does this include some of the properties that have giant crops of weeds that are like 10 feet tall that
Yeah,
aren't,
Yeah.
that are
it's-
in the back?
That's the problem, see, and I can't trespass going in the
Right.
backyard to take photos, or I would have done that. But they're not maintaining their backyards, which are, it's impeding then the neighbor, which is,
Yes.
not neighborly, but it's also,
Virginia, is there you have a good relationship with Mark. There's also an Iowa code on the control of noxious weeds. Do you mind getting a hold of that ordinance? I mean, that Iowa code? Mark?
I'm sorry. You have the same access to Google that I have.
Well,
You want to do it. look it
I'd
up.
rather make sure, well, that's fine. I'll reach out to him.
There's a
You don't
list of
need to
not,
reach
you
out
can
to him.
Google the list of noxious weeds, and then you're going to have to
yeah.
identify the weeds, and that's a little difficult.
The point is that we want to regulate for what Iowa code allows us to do. I mean, to start regulating for all sorts of undesirable aesthetics of plants is a different question. And so I can tell you
I
that
think
there
if it's overgrown.
but it may be overgrown for different reasons other than on maintenance, especially
Well,
if it's in the
one-
backyard. You may have some naturalist.
One issue was the house that sold on June 7th, and the new owner is listed because I checked the assessor's site. So the obligation and legal obligation transferred, and nothing has been done, and that backyard is a disaster. And the neighbors are complaining for good reason. So we should have some, authority there to tell them to get that,
Because of the ordinance, right?
yeah, fixed.
You know what? I Googled already. I'll send it to all of you.
Okay, so Dottie, you're going to work on that for the next 2 weeks, meeting September 10th, okay. I want to go to the mayor's report. I wanted to talk to council. I got several responses about the Finkbein proposal work session meeting. Monday, September 9th at 6:30 works for Lisa, Dottie, Virginia. Does that Monday work for you, Sylvia?
I thought I responded yes.
I didn't see it. I'm sorry. So that's good. So yes for you. And Monday,
it's-
September 9th at
Okay, just-
6:30. And I know Nick is unable to meet on that Monday, but Nate Kading and Ben Logston and David Kieft we'll set up a meeting with you. I'll give you their emails and you can set up another night or another day. Okay, so we'll go on to hotel project update. And Jim Glasgow's here tonight. Thank you, Jim. Lots going on over there, it looks like.
Yeah, we're coming up out of the ground now, and there's some pictures over there. I don't know if everybody saw them, but that shows our where we're at as of today. And we're on the second floor of the main elevator shaft right now. We've got to go up 4 stories, and probably within another week you'll see us up to the 4th story on the one elevator shaft. The foundation is all in the parking level, and then we're continuing on the foundation that goes around the pool area. So, and fencing is going up over some of our retaining walls. And we're going to pour about 300 feet of parking lot along the railroad tracks, which just helps mitigate some of the mud that is on site. So our people then will be able to park on concrete. We can't bring the big trucks in that way. We'll still have to deal with that. But I have been trying to keep the streets clean. The rain's been the big problem. I mean, as soon as it rains, but we get out there right away, and we do have a street sweeper on site that we leave on site.
Can you pass it this way?
If anybody mentions anything, and I know a couple people have said something, but sometimes I can't get out there because of the traffic. So usually I have to wait till 5:30 or 6, and then I'll get out and clean it. So other than that, though, we're on schedule, and we're hoping to get a little bit ahead of schedule if the weather stays dry and we don't have any problems. We're really coming up out of the mud though now. So the next phase that you'll see will be steel substructure and then precast. So Terry's been great to work with, and he's kind of keeping an eye on the project when I'm not there. So it's great to have him around too. So
Are there questions for?
yeah, does anybody have any questions? Okay.
You told me when you came in you wanted to remove resolution 19.
Yeah, I'd like to
33.
defer. I'd just like to defer consideration on 19-33. We need to study that a little bit more on our end. So if we can do that, I'd like to just defer that.
Okay. That's okay with council, correct? Yeah. I'm just trying to think if there's any question. No, it was, cleanup was important.
Yeah, right.
And I know you tried to address it, and I'm glad you got a street sweeper.
Well, between the football games, we're going to try and tap into the water on Melrose, and there's a 2-week stretch in there where there's no football games, so we're going to try and tap our water main in. We've got the sewer is in, electrical is in, our media conduits are in. That's really the last thing that we have to do to tap into the water system. But the City of Iowa City's been giving me a little grief on that, so I'm trying to work something out with them. They wanted the foundation installed completely before we can bring the water into the site, which makes no sense to me, but we're pushing the foundation, trying to get that wrapped up so that we can get that worked out with them. Other than that, did you want to talk about the swimming pool at this point, or okay? All right. Other than that, unless anybody's got any questions,
No.
that's our.
I was just going to say Triangle Park looks nice. I don't know if we talked about that since
Yeah.
that was finished.
Yeah, no, we had people bring their dogs the first day there to drink out of the dog water. So yeah, no, I think that worked out real well.
Question, would it be a big expense to, and this might be not something that you would do, but to refinish the bike rack, down there?
Yeah,
Maybe
just,
like I don't know if you have to sandblast it or
It
just
wouldn't
sand it.
really, I would probably not sandblast it, but just take emery cloth and shine it up and repaint it. I think it is a little bit rusty. And I don't know how stable it is at the base. I didn't look at it that well, but I think it could just be sanded and painted. So I'll see if I can get somebody to donate that to get that cleaned up. I think one of our guys will probably do that. And somebody did question about the sidewalk. I mean, that really is sort of a temporary sidewalk because we know it's going to get torn out during the Vision project in a couple of years. So we didn't spend any time replacing the sidewalk. We kind of left that as is.
Because we wanted to do pavers there when they finally do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why that's kind of is not poor condition. It's okay, but I mean it's not fancy or anything, and that's the reason.
Do we have $200 left in the budget of that project that we could use to get a couple of like perennial flowers to plant in the back there?
Yep. Because we spent $19,800 at this point, so there's another $200 in there if you. But
okay, I mean I'll plant them.
Oh, all right, okay.
If
Well,
somebody will buy them.
Chris is donating 3 hosta.
Seriously, if you want some.
Okay. Or anything you can get at Menards.
Yellow this time of year. All right.
Anything you can get at Menards, we'll throw in a little extra if they have any.
Okay.
I haven't looked at
Do you want to
their-
take a field trip to Menards?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jim. And so we'll go on to legal report. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks. I'm sorry, Sylvia, if I missed your request. I didn't find it in my inbox, but I did just send to the council the agreement that the city has with Stan Lauberman or had with Stan Lauberman. The version I have is unsigned, but I sent you the resolution and the
Okay,
agreement.
thank you. I just wanted to look at scope and familiarize myself with some of the other terms.
Yeah, okay. So, and I apologize if I missed that. I didn't
fine.
see it when I looked just now. So, Resolution 1933 is withdrawn. So Resolution 1934 approves the stormwater facilities maintenance covenant and easement agreement for the hotel project. It's been reviewed and approved by city engineer as well as building official. It's been approved by the hotel developers. So
I'll motion adoption
1934
then.
is before you.
Okay, motion by Sylvia.
Second.
And second by Dottie. Thank you. And is there any discussion? Roll call vote.
Maher,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Herbold,
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Carried.
And then 1935, you've
Was-
approved already.
yes.
1936, I don't think the council's going to take action on tonight. So the next item, I believe, is ordinance number 239, which has been before the council for a first reading, I think, 3 times. This is, so, once we got the new agreement with Johnson County Refuse for services, and we went back and just kind of made sure that some existing refuse and recycling ordinances, were consistent with the agreement that was signed, so that we weren't sort of saying two things to consumers, to citizens. And I think we finally have it right. Steve Smith has reviewed it and agrees with what it says. It's not inconsistent with the agreement. So the first reading of ordinance 239 is before you.
And I do want to say thank you for sending me the explanation on the composting for residential use.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I motion adoption.
I'll second.
Motion by Virginia, second by Dottie. Discussion. Roll call vote.
Moore.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Herbold.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Carried.
And then I wasn't really sure whether, you can hand this to Chris, I think I forgot to give it to her, whether you were going to go ahead with 1937, which is that kind of sound permit for the event that Stella wants to have to benefit neighborhood centers. It's on your agenda, and it's very similar to what you've approved.
A motion
in prior-
adoption.
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Motion
Sylvia,
by
Dottie.
Sylvia and second by Dottie.
Thank you.
And discussion. Roll call vote.
Miller.
Aye.
Herbold.
Aye.
Casada.
Aye.
Maher.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Carried.
I think that's everything I have.
Is there any questions for Steve? Okay, we'll go to Chris's report, clerk report.
Sent out my written report as normal, along with the rental permits that we've received as of, as of July. I will have another report for all of the permits that are coming in August. And the due date is September 30th. Excuse me again. The due date was moved to make it a more, efficient process, so that we didn't have the redundancy in reviewing forms several times for old tenants and new tenants. And so far, the process has been going quite well. We've received positive feedback on this, allowing the tenants to come back so they can get signatures on the forms. It's worked really well. Next year, we will have the forms available on the website, and that will make the process even smoother because it'll all be through workflow. Things will be scanned right away. One thing I do want to bring up, or have brought up at the meeting that I won't be able to attend for the rental permit discussion, is maps, diagrams. I have little maps, I have good maps, I have poor maps. So you might want to talk about what you want to see on these maps. Some of them are colorful, so maybe some consistency would be helpful. So that's all I have at this point.
Thank you for all your work on that, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
What type of maps is this, where we have the rental permits throughout the city?
Parking diagrams and bedroom layout.
Parking.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Do you think it would be helpful to show us like your best examples and then
I
like
can-
some examples that are bad, so we can maybe think about guidelines to?
I can send out some examples.
Good question.
Of what I would consider good and bad. But I'm saying that from a perspective of looking at them and going, you're council, you have to decide what you want to see and what is important. So yes, I can do that.
Any other questions for Chris? Thank you, Chris. You won't be at the September 10th
will not be
meeting.
available, no.
Have a nice trip.
Thank you.
And we go to the treasurer's report. Lori sent her report, and she had 2 warrants listed, and everyone got that. Is there any objection to paying those 2 warrants? Hearing none, the warrants will be paid by unanimous consent. And Lori didn't make it tonight, but she'll be here September 10th. Then we have the chief report, and Chief circulated his report tonight, and we might as well.
May I touch on a few items on it? Just a few, real quick.
Sure.
First of all, apologies for those of you who tried to get a hold of me this last week. I let the mayor know, but unexpectedly, I needed to be out of town to deal with some family issues up in Minneapolis. But I'm back now. For those of you who reached out to me and I didn't get back to you immediately, I apologize. Staffing, again, we're at full staffing now. Those numbers are self-explanatory. The next thing that I have to do with staff, now that we're at full staff, is we're going to start reviewing existing policy and reissuing policy. We won't do it in mass. I think that that's too much to do at once, but we'll parse it out with our critical policies to begin with. Things like pursuit, use of force, things like that. Football games, everything is in place for that. This first will be, we will reassess after each football game and reallocate resources. I consider this first one in particular a trial run. We are going to be immediately addressing, obviously, any public safety concerns, and that could be with arrest, that could be with, whatever needs to happen for us to make it a safe environment. Beyond that, we're going to be doing a lot of education, both for the community, for me, and for my officers. We're going to document things so that I can deal with Terry then on the most appropriate way to follow it up. I would encourage, whether you hear from community members or they contact me, I would like to hear the things that went wrong, or that, for instance, and porta potties have come up here recently, but, issues, whether they be parking or porta potties or rude behavior, things that are detrimental to everybody's enjoyment. I would like to hear about that, and they will be addressed, but they might not be addressed on that Saturday. I'm not going to necessarily make somebody reposition a porta potty. We will address it, we'll move forward. There won't be continued violations of it, or there will be municipal and criminal sanctions or citations issued for that. So anyway, that is going to be my approach on that. I want to give kudos publicly here to Jeremy Stenda, and I see I have a typo in his name. He'd asked me if he could do this. This isn't the only grant that he applied for, but he applied for a grant from Walmart, one of their community grants. He received $1,000 specifically earmarked for a Shop with a Cop program. To my knowledge, and I've asked around, University Heights has never done that on their own. I don't believe they've even participated with other agencies. So this is going to be something new for us. Jeremy and I talked about, because I'm kind of putting this in his lap, how we would like to do it. And I think we're going to work with the elementary school to help identify area families here in University Heights, or certainly close by, that could use some assistance. And this will be something then that in December, with whichever religion you happen to practice, but the winter holidays, be able to use that money to help those kids purchase gifts for both themselves, their siblings, and their parents. But anyway, I want to make sure I threw out a kudos to Jeremy Stend on that. He has other applications in the works, so we'll see what comes of that. I wanted to skip down to D. We have relied on a software firm out of Cedar Rapids for our IT support. They bill $105 an hour. It's not inexpensive. They also don't know our systems from the inside out, so they end up becoming just one more cog that I have to deal with. I contacted the in-house Iowa City, his title over there is systems analyst, but their in-house IT support, and asked him about the possibility of him doing some freelance or contract work for us. And he has, the rate that he quoted me, his hourly rate is 43, what did I say there? I don't know that I put it in. Let's see. 47% hourly savings. He has brought all the 5 new cars online as of today. The racial profiling form that has taken months to implement and goes back to Chief Peterson, he managed to get up and running in 2 weeks. It's in both the cars and it's in the police department. We will begin collecting data at the beginning of September. He said there will be one more piece that needs to be put in place to export that to Chris Barnum at St. Ambrose. But he has accomplished in less than 4 weeks what I have not been able to accomplish up to that point. And again, what I would like to think is a considerable savings to the community, if in nothing else, in frustration and man hours that I had put into it. I have been forwarded and I've been contacted by a number of community members. This is on the next one. And this is something U Heights does need to move forward with. But the Citizens Advisory Board that is referenced in that same ordinance that requires us to collect data, I've reviewed that ordinance, and the selection process involves members of the council, Kevin Sanders, well, not Kevin Sanders specifically, but the Iowa City president or his designee of the NAACP chapter. I spoke with Kevin Sanders just last weekend, actually, and we talked about meeting this week, but with the football game, I wanted to get through football issues. So we're going to meet next week. Nick has already, we've exchanged some communication on it.
I would like to
Yeah.
participate.
We can do that. Typically, Kevin likes to meet. It just is his free time, but we'll meet over lunch. So I was thinking at Stella, but we can make that work. And then in discussion, Virginia also mentioned that one of the things Kevin had mentioned before was ongoing training, and that's a very important piece to keep on top of. So that is also will be on the table literally for us to discuss. Kevin had some reservations about the process as it was outlined, or maybe his role in it. So anyway, we'll discuss that. We need to move this whole thing forward. Hopefully hopefully Nick can join and Dottie can join, but we'll have something more concrete to tell you or to move this forward. Kickoff to Kinnick, I touched base with the Marriott group before they left. So again, we're all on base for that, but I wanted to throw that out there as you deal with your constituents and people in the community. That event happens September 21st. Runners will be running along Melrose Avenue. As they come through University Heights, they'll be coming from Mormon Track through University Heights down to the stadium. While that event is going on, traffic on Melrose will flow, but it will only flow one direction. It will be westbound only during that event. Again, the Marriott group is aware of it. If they are working that Saturday, they will route their trucks in from Iowa City side and route them out through our side. It will not restrict access at all to anything in University Heights, but it will mess with traffic flow, and you'll only be able to travel on Melrose westbound during that event. And that's all I had to touch base on to make sure I pointed out to you, unless anybody has questions.
And that event is about what time? Just so people kind of know. I think it's quite early.
It is, and I'm sorry I did not bring the times with me.
That's okay. We'll have September 10th. We can get the dates or the times.
And it's a 5K event, so it's relatively short in duration, but they are blocking the lane, and it is open to.
It's fairly early.
It's open to walkers. I have participated in it before, and it's a very well organized event, but they will maintain that lane for safety reasons until the last walker is finished. So it could be 2.5 hours.
Chief, I did want to make a comment, and that is I wanted to thank you very much to you and your staff for managing all of the farmers market posters and all of the signages for that.
Some of those signs will likely need to be replaced. The wind particularly has taken a toll on those bigger ones.
They were kind of folded. I saw that.
Yes.
But nonetheless, I appreciate it because it's a task. It starts early in the day and it goes late into the evening, and you don't find a whole lot of volunteers for it. So I was really appreciative of the service for helping this community event, which closed tonight. And I just wanted to say thank you. And some of our vendors did ask about it. I mean, that's how they build their customer base, and they were pleased with the responses I was able to provide from what you were telling me.
Good.
So I wanted to say thank you on that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate hearing that. I'll make sure that gets passed on to the officers.
Super. And then the last comment I did want to ask is about the Caltech arrival of the 5 patrol vehicles.
Yes.
I wanted to know what will be the policy for the usage of these vehicles, because the prior chief had a different policy position. I'm not sure if it's going to be the same as what you might take. And so my interest is in making sure that our team knows exactly what to expect with the usage of these vehicles, especially if they're going to be leaving city boundaries. That's an interest that I'd like to see explored relatively soon, since the vehicles are already here.
Right. They do routinely leave city boundaries, but usually it's when the officers are working. For instance, when they go down to the fuel pumps, or when they take a prisoner to Johnson County Jail or go to courthouse. I mean, they just have to. One of the things that I used in recruiting officers to come here is that if they live within the county, my plan is to allow them to take the vehicles to and from their home, directly to and from. They aren't to stop for groceries. They aren't to take enforcement actions unless it is such a low discretion issue, a hit and run of a pedestrian, something like that. And much like some of the other issues that we have talked about, there does need to be written policy on that, but that is the direction. That is my intent, to allow them to use that.
Okay. And it doesn't sound like a very complicated process. Do you think we might see something in writing, say, in September before these vehicles start rolling off?
Sure.
Okay,
I can do
perfect.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
You might want to look up that kickoff at 10.
Oh, there you go.
9 to noon.
And because we're on the back half of it, like I said, it'll likely be impacting our traffic flow till at least 11:30. Cross traffic on Sunset and Kozer, there won't be any issue. We will have officers doing traffic control at all those positions. Iowa City, U Heights, Coralville are also doing traffic control positions. But for a large portion of that time, it will be westbound only on Melrose. Yes.
It's a great report. The only thing I just wanted to really kind of advertise a couple things. One is we do need more citizens advisory board applicants. I think it would be good to get as many as possible. So for those of you who reach out to people, I think that would be good to maybe mention that. Also, I think our Chief Kelsey has done a great job on the football game day parking situation, which he's put in F. And how many?
It's not a grade, by the way.
Yeah. How many have you sold so far?
By word of mouth, we have sold, I believe, 2 of them. I've got somebody else who came in and asked about them. I'm not sure. They are a local resident. They also live on Marriott. I know some of the concerns in the past that perhaps they would be resold, if you will. And I guess at this point, I'm less interested in that. Right now, they're being underutilized. I intend to be up there on Saturday morning. That is one of the reasons why I'm coming in early. And we will, much like we do for Farmers Market, we will mark off those spaces with cones. I will use police tape or something similar to stretch from cone to cone. And while I am up there, or while officers are up there, we will always keep a few spaces open, basically as an invitation for people to pull in, at which time they'll be told that, again, this year's pricing structure, fee structure, is $40 per game, or $30 per game if they buy the remaining season pass. We are making it this year so that the football parking passes are easily transferable from vehicles. So, if you and I typically tailgate together, but sometimes we're in my truck or sometimes we're in your Jeep or whatever the case may be, we don't have to buy 2. It can go on a vehicle or it can go on a placard that's prominently displayed. So that's the way that we're going to deal with it. At some point near the beginning of the game or later in the day, we'll pull off those spaces, and if they get pirated, they get pirated. But we're going to make sure that everybody has permits or that wants to has the opportunity to pay their fee and guarantee their spots.
Yeah, and I'd say one of the people that I sent to you did
Amanda.
a lot of due diligence and looking around and
Right.
found that to be the best option. So.
And the thing that people have concerned about, or, again, am I going to be able to set up a lawn chair? Am I going to be able to tailgate? What's available to me? And I've been honest with them and said, no, you can't impede traffic. But if you're not impeding traffic, I don't care. Or if you know people that are parking at, for instance, the apartments and paying to park there and tailgate, and you just want to be close and you already have a place, then this is a great place to come and park. Unlike the other places, it doesn't matter if it rains Saturday. This is a hard surface on the street, easy to get in and out of. So we'll see. We've already sold at full price as many tickets as we sold last year.
And it matters if it rains Saturday.
Yes, absolutely.
And also, I don't think we've discussed, did we discuss yet the event that happened on August, at
National
the
Night-
park, the night out?
No, we didn't. And I
And
should
did
have
you
meant
want to
to put that.
report
and
some of that? Because
Yes.
it was a wonderful event.
I actually had pictures to put in there, and I neglected to put that. It was very well attended. It was National Night Out. It happened to be the same night as Farmers Market, which dovetailed, I think, nicely for both events. Some of the people who came for my event crossed the street for Farmers Market, and some that came for Farmers Market crossed the street. It was a beautiful day. If anything, it was a little bit warm. Honestly, I wasn't sure if it'd just be Officer Matt Mackey and me and Bonnie Peno. I believe I'm saying that right. Had volunteered to help. She contacted Virginia, and Virginia put her in touch with me. I really wasn't sure what to expect, given that we did not promote it in a similar fashion that Iowa City Police Department and I have promoted other events. That said, in the years that I've done National Night Outs, I think this was, and I'm biased now because I'm wearing a University Heights Police Department uniform, I think this was the best one that I have attended. Between the farmers market and Matt and I each had patrol cars down there. Captain Mark Bullock from the University of Iowa Police Department had reached out to me earlier in the week and said, hey, do you mind if we stop by? I thought he meant he was going to come by. They sent patrol vehicles. There was at least 2, if not 3, but they sent marked patrol vehicles that also set up. Iowa City had a vehicle for McGruff that showed up, a vehicle for Herky that showed up, and then Officer Hayes, their community service officer or community relations officer who organizes all these events, showed up. So we had at times as many as 7 patrol cars there. Iowa City Fire was there. We had Dane's Dairy Ice Cream, which, again, in talking with you all and community members, it's not unusual to have to distribute that or store that afterwards. We ran out.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh.
Yes. The splash pad was certainly a draw. It was a great event. And what was refreshing for me is most people were University Heights or nearby members of the community. It wasn't like I traveled down here from, I think the person the farthest away that kind of came to come was from Morse. And that's because he had a relative that lived down here. But it was truly that community event. And I can't remember what the slogan is
But
on.
each year it has been that way
Oh,
here.
it was. I was impressed. I spent the whole time. I was very glad that you'd arranged for Bonnie to be there, because I didn't have time to hand out ice cream. I spent the entire time talking to people, talking to kids, talking to their parents, taking pictures with them. Got Herky in the patrol cars, and again, I apologize. I meant to put them in here, and I completely forgot about that until the mayor mentioned it. But it was the most successful National Night Out event that I have ever been part of, and that's saying a lot.
And I think in part it's because of the cool toys and stickers that you picked out for all those kiddos.
Oh, thank you.
I
for
was
reminding me.
sharing the Herky pictures of Herky and you and our police chief. I sent it to my dad and I said, one of these is our new police chief. And then
I need to get some of those to Lisa
and then
so that they
yeah,
can be
you need to
featured.
put them up.
Yes.
They're really good. And then Herky is in the police car, in the University Heights police car.
Yes.
It's standing by it. Really nice pictures.
No, it was
a very nice.
It was a
event.
great event, and it is very unfortunate, Dottie, that you couldn't attend.
Yeah. Well, it was part of our Crime Stoppers.
Exactly. Anyway, I said it'd be a few
Yeah,
minutes, and I was
thank
probably
you.
at least 15.
Well, I
so
wanted you to talk about it. It was
I'm having
great.
trouble being short.
Thank you.
So.
Thank
All right.
you, Chief.
Thank you.
And so we go on to Nick. Did
I
you
don't
have anything?
further. Nope.
Okay. Finance, Sylvia.
Well, I want to say that today is the last day for the farmers market. Several of the vendors wanted to know if we could extend it simply because a lot of their produce is still rolling in. But I looked over through some of our notes from the last 2 years, and it's just not a productive process. So unless council feels strongly to extend it through the month of September, I'm going to leave that for a motion for all of you to decide. But there's a lot of produce coming in, and our vendors are what I call the founding vendors of our farmers market post the One University Place construction project, and they have consistently showed up and provided their produce and any other items to our residents and nearby neighbors, and they are very, very pleased that they have such a customer base here that's very dedicated to them. So thank you to all of our residents and nearby residents who come out every Tuesday to support them. And I also know that some residents are also using some of the delivery systems that some of these vendors have set up, so they're also appreciative for that opportunity. With respect to the budget, I wanted to point out that I was looking at the profit and loss report, and we're noting a deficit, and I reached out to Chris to find out what our income for rental property is looking like, and that is she gave us an explanation that for September, that's when the deadline is for receiving income for all rental permits. So that deficit should be going down. But we have still a problem, and that is the hotel motel 7% projection that we included in in the 2019-2020 budget, we estimated that the hotel would be up by December of this year, giving us 6 months worth of revenue. That's not going to happen, so our budget needs to be amended to reflect that. But I'm holding off on an amendment until we figure out what our budget for the rental housing program is, because it makes sense to amend your budget once and not in piecemeal fashion. So there's nothing in Iowa code that prevents us from doing this, and it is considered a best practice in order to keep your line items balanced to what exactly it is that you're projecting expenditure on. And when I reached out to the industry and asked, well, is this really a significant change in our budget? The answer was overwhelmingly yes, given your budget numbers. So we're up for an amendment, and we can look at that once we settle on some projections. And as I said earlier, Virginia and I will get together on projecting some revenue for the rental housing inspector line item. And that's about it. So be careful how we spend our budget. I did notice that our legal expenses are already at 30% drawdown for general legal expenditure. So I don't know how we're using legal counsel, but you're all professionals, and I'm hoping that at $200 you have a really burning good legal question to ask and not administrative issues to be sending off to our city attorney to do. When we have other resources like the city clerk, maintenance, engineering, other staff, that certainly comes down at a different cost center. So that's it. Otherwise, I don't control that line item.
Are there any questions for Sylvia? Okay, we'll move to e-government. Lisa, you circulated your report,
I did.
and I just want to say you did a fantastic job leading the committee to the final release of the website. I know it's a work in progress, and you're constantly working on it daily to fix things, but I've heard so many nice things about it. Thank you so much for everything you've done with it. You've really took the leadership role in getting things accomplished and talking to Civic Plus, and very nice indeed. And I'm sure everybody has looked at it kind of like, whoa, what's this?
It does look a little different.
Yeah,
And
it's
Steve
wonderful.
Ballard won the prize for being the first person to say, hey, there's
A
new
mistake?
website. No,
No,
there's a new website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it looks great, Lisa.
Thanks.
Looks really good. I did have one question because I was fiddling around with the different options. It's just so easy to maneuver. I noticed that if there are any concerns that residents want, what's the process? Because the only process I saw was filling out forms for UHPD, filling out forms for streets and sidewalks, but I didn't see a button or an option for any ordinance general concern that somebody might have. For example, a porta potty has overstayed its welcomed. Where does a resident report that? It doesn't fit into streets and sidewalks, and it doesn't fit into UHPD. And I was wondering, what are the options? And that's it.
So that was just something that we worked on during the training engagement. And we went ahead and posted some of those forms. And if there's a form that you want to see, a general one, we can do that if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second question is, I happen to be a little bit familiar with Civic Plus just because it just happens to be that way. And they have a feature that's available that's called, if you look at Johnson County's website, they call it the Fix It button. If you go to Iowa City, it's a, complaint. If you go to any other city, you press a button and you start a resident or concerned citizen inquiry or request for the city to do something about it. I was wondering, why don't we have that feature turned on, and if it's possible to have it turned on as a feature for our website?
So you were just talking about the citizen request tracker forms.
Mhm.
You're talking about something different now?
Yeah, it's a button. Yeah.
A button.
Yeah, like a hyperlink. Go to Johnson County
Well,
website.
we don't have a button. We have a form.
I believe we're talking the same thing. We can create something that would institute a workflow system.
We could.
They call
Okay.
it a button, we call it a form. So if there's something that you want to see, I would suggest that you let Lisa know, and then we can look into it.
I'll put it in writing. I'll send
Yeah,
something.
but it will be a form. That's the module.
Okay, and
This is what we have available, so, yeah. It'll be a form like that.
We have many modules that we haven't even tapped into.
yeah, that's my understanding. So it's a really nice suite. I mean, that's what I like about this product is that there's a lot of modules, like you're saying, that we haven't touched, and some of them are free, which means we don't have to worry about paying for their operation. So I'll send something to you and to Lisa, since you guys were part of that committee, right?
Sure.
Okay, super.
Okay, any other questions for Lisa? Okay, are there any announcements? Okay, is there any objection to adjourning? Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you for coming.